The studio lights of Good Morning America blazed with their usual intensity as Travis Kelce settled into the plush interview chair, his signature smile lighting up his face. The conversation with host Rebecca Martinez had been flowing perfectly. Light banter about touchdown celebration, upcoming playoff game, the kind of easy entertainment that filled morning television between harder news segments. Well, Travis, speaking of making people smile, we've got a more serious note to end on today, Rebecca said, glancing at her teleprompter. Our news team has been covering a heartbreaking story about homeless veterans in Kansas City. Since you're so involved with community outreach, we thought you might want to comment. Travis nodded respectfully as the large monitor behind them flickered to life, displaying the title graphic for their investigative piece on veteran homelessness. Absolutely, Rebecca. That's something really close to my heart. Veterans deserve so much better than what we're sometimes giving them. Our reporter, Sarah Chen, spent several weeks documenting the crisis, Rebecca continued, her voice taking on the professional tone reserved for harder news. The numbers are staggering. In Kansas City alone, we're looking at over 300 veterans living on the streets, many dealing with mental health issues and trauma from their service. The monitor changed to show video footage from the investigative piece. Scenes of tent encampments under highway overpasses, people bundling against the cold, the stark reality of homelessness in America's heartland. Travis watched intently, preparing to offer some thoughtful commentary about community responsibility. What really struck our team, Rebecca said, was how many of these individuals were once pillars of their community. Teachers, coaches, mentors who shaped countless lives before their own circumstances changed. Then, the image changed to a single photograph that would alter everything. An older man with a graying beard, weathered face, and tired eyes looked directly into the camera. He held a cardboard sign that read, "Homeless veteran, need help. God bless," in shaky handwriting. The man wore a faded Kansas City Chiefs jacket that had seen better days. Travis Kelce stopped mid-sentence. His face went completely white, as if all the blood had suddenly drained from his head. His eyes locked onto the photograph with an intensity that was immediately visible to everyone in the studio. His hand moved unconsciously to cover his mouth, a gesture of pure shock and disbelief. "Coach Frank?" The words came out as barely a whisper, but in the sudden silence of the studio, they carried with crystal clarity. Travis seemed to forget entirely that he was on live television, broadcasting to millions of homes across America. Rebecca Martinez, a seasoned broadcaster with over 15 years of experience, immediately recognized that something extraordinary was happening. She had conducted thousands of interviews, but she had never seen a guest react with such visceral, immediate emotion. The studio fell into a silence so complete that the only sounds were the quiet hum of the air conditioning system and the barely audible clicks and whirs of the cameras continuing to record. Travis stared at the screen, his breathing shallow, his entire body frozen in shock. The camera operators, sensing something unprecedented unfolding, kept rolling. And across America, millions of viewers leaned forward in their chairs, knowing they were about to witness something that would change everything. "Travis, are you okay?" Rebecca asked, her professional instincts kicking in as she watched the NFL star's face remain completely drained of color. She glanced quickly at her producer, Dwayne Thompson, who was visible through the glass partition of the control room. He was leaning forward, completely focused, making quick hand gestures to the camera operators to keep rolling. This was unscripted television at its most powerful. "I know this man," Travis said, his voice stronger now but heavy with emotion. He pointed at the screen where the homeless veteran's photo still dominated the display. "This is Franklin Whitmore. Everyone called him Coach. He was my youth football coach from when I was 8 until I was 13. He literally changed the entire trajectory of my life." The weight of that statement settled over the studio like a heavy blanket. Rebecca realized she was witnessing something extraordinary unfolding in real time, the kind of moment that would be replayed and analyzed for years to come. She made a split-second decision that would define her career. Instead of moving to commercial break as scheduled, she leaned forward and committed to drawing out this story. "He taught me everything," Travis continued, his voice beginning to crack with emotion. "Not just about football, but about being a man, about never giving up, about believing in myself when nobody else. When I was struggling in school, when other coaches said I wasn't big enough or fast enough, Coach Frank never stopped believing. Travis rubbed his face with both hands, a gesture that spoke to the overwhelming nature of seeing his childhood mentor reduced to holding a cardboard sign on a street corner. He used to tell all of us kids that we were champions already. We just had to grow into it. He never gave up on any of us, no matter how much trouble we got into or how badly we screwed up. Travis, can you tell our viewers more about Coach Frank and what he meant to you? Rebecca asked, recognizing that she needed to guide this conversation carefully while allowing Travis the space to process his shock. Travis took a deep breath, composing himself for what he knew would be one of the most important conversations of his life. Coach Frank wasn't just a football coach, Rebecca. He was a mentor, a father figure, and honestly, a lifesaver for a lot of kids in our neighborhood. This was in Kansas City, in an area that didn't have a lot of resources or opportunities for young people. He ran this youth football program out of a community center that was falling apart. Travis continued, his voice growing stronger as he found his footing in the story. The equipment was old, the field was more dirt than grass, and Coach Frank was basically running the whole thing by himself. But he treated every single one of us like we were future NFL stars. What made him special as a coach? Rebecca asked, fully engaged in drawing out this story. He saw potential in kids that nobody else would even look at twice. Travis replied without hesitation. I was this skinny kid from a broken home, acting out in school, getting into trouble. Most adults had already written me off. But Coach Frank, he pulled me aside one day and said, Travis, you've got something special inside you, but you've got to decide if you want to let it out or keep it buried under all this anger. The emotion in Travis's voice was palpable as he continued. He made me stay after practice every day for extra conditioning, not as punishment, but as investment. He said if I was serious about changing my life, I had to be willing to work harder than everyone else. And you know what? He stayed late with me every single day, never complained, never made me feel like I was a burden. How long were you in his program? Rebecca asked, keeping the focus on drawing out more details. 5 years, from 3rd grade through 8th grade, Travis answered. Those were some of the most formative years of my life, and Coach Frank was the most consistent adult presence I had during that time. My mom was working 3 jobs just to keep food on the table, and my dad wasn't really in the picture. Coach Frank filled that gap. Travis paused, gathering his thoughts before sharing what was clearly a deeply personal memory. I remember when I was in 6th grade, I got arrested for shoplifting. Stupid kid stuff, but it could have derailed everything. The police called Coach Frank before they called my mom because I had listed him as an emergency contact. He came down to the station in the middle of the night and sat with me until they released me. What did he say to you that night? Rebecca asked, recognizing the power of the moment Travis was describing. He didn't lecture me or yell at me like I expected, Travis replied, a small smile crossing his face at the memory. He just looked at me and said, Travis, you've got 2 paths in front of you right now. You can let this mistake define your future, or you can let it teach you who you don't want to be. Which path are you going to choose? Then he made me write a letter to the store owner apologizing and offered to have me work off what I had stolen. That's remarkable, Rebecca said, genuinely moved by the story. And clearly, it worked. It did more than work, Travis emphasized. It saved my life. Coach Frank didn't just teach us football skills, he taught us life skills. How to handle disappointment, how to work as a team, how to respect ourselves and others. He used football as a vehicle to teach us how to be men. The interview was interrupted by Dwayne Thompson, the producer, who appeared on set with a note card. He handed it to Rebecca, who read it quickly and looked up with obvious urgency. Travis, we've got some immediate information about Coach Frank. Our news team has been making calls during the commercial breaks. Travis straightened in his chair, his full attention focused on whatever information they had gathered. What did you find out? He's currently in Kansas City, as our report indicated, Rebecca read from the card. According to Sarah Kellerman, a social worker who's been trying to help him, Franklin Whitmore has been homeless for approximately 2 years. He's been living in various locations around the city, and Ms. Kellerman says he's been very resistant to accepting help. The relief that washed over Travis's face was visible to everyone watching. At least he's alive, he's local. That's something I can work with. Do they have any information about how to contact him or find him? Ms. Kellerman is standing by to speak with you after the show, Rebecca replied. She says the situation is complex, but she's willing to provide whatever assistance she can to help reconnect you with Coach Frank. Travis nodded eagerly, then looked back at the camera with renewed purpose. To anyone watching this who might know Coach Frank or Franklin Whitmore, please understand that this man is a hero. He dedicated years of his life to helping kids like me become better people. If you've seen him around Kansas City, if you know anything that might help us find him and get him the support he needs, please reach out to the show. We'll put our contact information on screen, Rebecca added. And Travis, what's your next step going to be? I'm going to find him, Travis said with absolute certainty. I'm going to find Coach Frank, and I'm going to make sure he knows that all the kids he helped over the years haven't forgotten him. He's not going to spend another night on the streets if I have anything to say about it. Travis didn't sleep that night. After his appearance on Good Morning America, he had immediately flown back to Kansas City and spent the evening making phone calls to every homeless shelter, outreach program, and social service organization in the city. By morning, he had assembled what amounted to a small task force of people committed to helping him locate Coach Frank. Sarah Kellerman met Travis at a downtown coffee shop at 7 in the morning, bringing with her a thick file folder containing everything she knew about Franklin Whitmore's recent history. I've been working his case for about 8 months, she explained, spreading photographs and documents across the small table. It's been incredibly frustrating because he's clearly intelligent and capable, but he's built these walls that are almost impossible to break through. The photographs showed a progression that was difficult for Travis to process. The most recent images bore little resemblance to the confident, energetic coach he remembered from his youth. Coach Frank appeared gaunt, his hair and beard unkempt, his clothes dirty and ill-fitting. But it was his eyes that struck Travis most powerful. They held an emptiness that seemed to speak of profound loss and disconnection. What happened to him? Travis asked, studying the images with obvious pain. How did he go from being this pillar of the community to living on the streets? Sarah opened another section of the file. It was a perfect storm of circumstances, unfortunately. About 4 years ago, he lost his job teaching at the high school due to budget cuts. Around the same time, his marriage fell apart. His wife, Linda, said he became increasingly depressed and started drinking heavily. Then his mother, who he had been caring for, passed away and left him with significant medical debt. So he lost everything all at once, Travis said quietly. Exactly. And for someone like Frank, who had spent his entire adult life being the person others relied on, suddenly finding himself in need of help was devastating to his sense of identity. Linda tried to get him into counseling and treatment programs, but he refused. He kept insisting he could handle it on his own. Travis shook his head, recognizing the stubborn pride he remembered from his childhood interactions with Coach Frank. That sounds like him. He was always the one solving problems for other people, never the one asking for help. The final blow came 2 years ago, Sarah continued. He had been staying with his brother temporarily, trying to get back on his feet, when his brother was killed in a car accident. Frank completely isolated himself after that. He stopped returning calls from friends and former colleagues, stopped going to job interviews, and eventually ended up on the streets. Tommy Rodriguez arrived at the coffee shop as Sarah was finishing her explanation. A weathered man in his 50s, with kind eyes and calloused hands, Tommy had been homeless himself for several years before finding stable housing through a veterans program. He now worked as a peer counselor, helping other homeless individuals navigate the complex web of social service. I've been trying to build trust with Frank for months, Tommy explained to Travis. He's not like a lot of the folks I work with. He's got education, he's articulate when he wants to be, but he's carrying some serious guilt and shame about his situation. He keeps saying he doesn't deserve help because he failed all the kids who counted on him. That's ridiculous, Travis said immediately. He didn't fail anyone. Life failed him. You try telling him that, Tommy replied with a sad smile. Frank's got it in his head that he's supposed to be the helper, not the one needing help. Every time I try to connect him with resource, he finds reasons why he's not worthy or why someone else needs it more. Sarah pulled out a map of downtown Kansas City and pointed to an area near the river. This is where he's been staying most consistently. There's an abandoned warehouse district where several homeless individuals have set up semi-permanent camp. Frank has a spot under an overpass where he's built a small shelter from cardboard and tarps. Can we go there now? Travis asked, already reaching for his jacket. We can try, Tommy said, but I need to warn you about something that happened 3 days ago. Frank took a bad fall trying to climb over a fence to get to his camp. He hurt his shoulder pretty badly, and I think he might have hit his head. He's been even more withdrawn and confused than usual since then. The three of them drove through downtown Kansas City in Sarah's social services van, past the gleaming business district and into the industrial area near the river. The contrast was stark. Within a few miles, they had traveled from a world of prosperity and opportunity into a forgotten corner of the city, where people survived rather than lived. Under the overpass, they found a small community of makeshift shelters. Shopping carts filled with personal belongings were parked strategically around the area, and several people sat around a small fire burning in a metal drum. The smell of unwashed bodies, stale alcohol, and urban decay filled the air. Tommy approached one of the men sitting by the fire. "Hey, Marcus, have you seen Frank today?" Marcus, a thin black man with graying hair, looked up suspiciously until he recognized Tommy. "Frank's been real bad since he fell. He's over there behind the big concrete pillar. He ain't been talking to nobody. Keeps saying people are trying to trick him into something." Travis felt his heart sink as they walked toward the area Marcus had indicated. Behind the concrete support pit, they found a small shelter constructed from cardboard boxes and blue tarp, held together with duct tape and rope. The structure was barely large enough for one person to lie down inside. "Frank?" Tommy called softly. "It's Tommy Rodriguez. I brought some friends who want to meet you." There was movement inside the shelter, and then a voice that Travis recognized, despite its raspy, tired quality. "Go away, Tommy. I told you I don't want any help. Just leave me alone." Travis stepped forward, his heart pounding. "Coach Frank? It's Travis Kelce. Do you remember me?" The silence that followed seemed to stretch for eternity. Finally, the front flap of the makeshift shelter moved aside, and Travis saw the face that had haunted him since yesterday morning's television appearance. Coach Frank looked even worse in person than he had in the photographs. His eyes were bloodshot and unfocused. There was a visible bruise on his temple from his recent fall, and his left arm hung at an awkward angle. "Travis," Coach Frank said, squinting as if trying to bring the younger man into focus. "Travis Kelce? That can't be right. Travis is just a kid. You're trying to trick me." "No, sir. It really is me," Travis said gently, kneeling down to be at eye level with his former coach. "I'm 29 years old now. I play professional football, just like we used to talk about when I was little. Remember how you always said I'd make it to the NFL if I kept working hard?" Coach Frank stared at Travis for a long moment, confusion and recognition warring in his expression. "You do look like Travis," he said slowly. "But why would Travis Kelce be here? Why would Travis Kelce care about an old failure like me?" Travis felt the words hit him like a physical blow. "Coach Frank, you're not a failure. You're the reason I am who I am today. You taught me everything that mattered." But Coach Frank was already retreating back into his shelter, shaking his head. "No, no, no. You're not real. People keep trying to trick me. Just leave me alone. I don't deserve help. I failed everyone who counted on me." Tommy put a hand on Travis's shoulder. "This is what I was talking about. He's not just dealing with homeless. He's dealing with some serious mental health issues. The fall he took a few days ago seems to have made his confusion worse." Travis felt a crushing sense of helplessness, watching his childhood hero retreating into a cardboard shelter, refusing to believe that someone cared enough to seek him out. The man who had once seemed invincible, who had solved every problem and answered every question, was now lost in his own mind. Sarah pulled Travis aside. "This is going to take time and professional help. You can't just fix this with good intentions and money. Frank needs medical attention, mental health treatment, and probably months of patient work to rebuild his sense of self-worth." As they walked back to the van, Travis looked over his shoulder at the small shelter where Coach Frank was hiding from the world. Pastor Jerome William, who ran a nearby ministry for homeless individuals, was approaching them with obvious concern on his face. "Are you the folks asking about Franklin?" Pastor Williams asked. "I've been worried about him ever since his fall. He's getting worse, and winter's coming. Honestly, I don't think he's going to make it through another cold season in his condition." Travis spent the next 72 hours in what could only be described as a state of controlled desperation. He had rented a suite at a downtown Kansas City hotel and turned it into a command center, complete with whiteboards, maps, and contact lists for every medical professional, social worker, and homeless advocate in the city. Sleep became secondary to the mission of saving Coach Frank. Marcus Holbrook, another former player from Coach Frank's program, had flown in from Denver when he heard about the situation. Now, a successful insurance executive with his own family, Marcus sat across from Travis in the hotel suite, both men struggling with the weight of seeing their childhood hero in such devastating circumstances. "I keep thinking about what he used to tell us," Marcus said, staring at the photographs Sarah had provided. "Remember how he always said that champions were made in the moments when no one was watching? That the real measure of a man was how he treated people who couldn't do anything for him?" Travis nodded, the irony not lost on him. "And here we are, two grown men who became successful partly because of his influence, and we let him slip through the crack. We were so busy building our own lives that we never looked back to check on the foundation." Dr. Patricia Hayes had agreed to meet with them after seeing Travis's appearance on Good Morning America. A renowned psychiatrist specializing in trauma and homelessness, she had worked with hundreds of individuals in situations similar to Coach Frank. Her office in downtown Kansas City reflected her serious commitment to her work. Walls lined with degrees and certification, shelves filled with research journals and case studies. "What you're describing is not uncommon among people who have dedicated their lives to helping others," Dr. Hayes explained during their consultation. "When these individuals find themselves in need of help, they often experience a profound identity crisis. Their entire sense of self-worth has been built around being the helper, not the one needing help." "So how do we reach him?" Travis asked. "How do we get through to him that accepting help doesn't diminish who he was or what he accomplished?" Dr. Hayes leaned back in her chair, considering the question carefully. "It requires patience, consistency, and most importantly, it requires rebuilding his sense of dignity. Frank needs to feel that he still has value to offer, that he's not just a charity. The key is finding a way for him to help others while he's being helped himself." The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Linda Whitmore, Coach Frank's ex-wife, called Travis after seeing news coverage of his search. Her voice was strained with years of pain and frustration, but also tinged with hope that maybe someone else could succeed where she had failed. "Travis, I want you to understand something about Frank," Linda said during their phone conversation. "He's not just stubborn about accepting help, he's terrified of it. In his mind, admitting he needs help is admitting that he failed everyone who ever counted on him, including all you boys he coached over the years." "But that's not true," Travis protested. "We all turned out fine, better than fine. We turned out great, and it was largely because of him." "I know that, and you know that, but Frank doesn't believe it," Linda replied sadly. "When everything started falling apart in his life, he convinced himself that it proved he was a fraud all along, that he had been giving advice he wasn't qualified to give, teaching lessons he hadn't really learned himself." That evening, Travis made another decision that would surprise everyone, including himself. He called Rebecca Martinez at Good Morning America and asked to appear on the show again, this time with a very specific purpose in mind. "I need to do something that might seem crazy," Travis told Rebecca during their phone call. "I want to go on the air and talk directly to Coach Frank. I want to tell him, in front of the whole country, what he meant to me and what he taught me. But more than that, I want to ask him for help." "Ask him for help?" Rebecca repeated, intrigued by the unexpected approach. Dr. Hayes says the key to reaching him is restoring his sense of purpose, his feeling that he still has value to offer. "So I'm going to ask him to coach me again. I'm going to tell him I need his guidance with some personal challenges I'm facing, and ask him to meet with me not as someone receiving charity, but as someone whose wisdom and experience I genuinely need." The following morning, Travis found himself back in the Good Morning America studio. But this time, the atmosphere was completely different. Instead of the casual interview setup from a few days earlier, this felt more like a direct address to the nation. The producers had agreed to let him speak without interruption for 5 unscripted minutes. When the red light on the camera came on, Travis looked directly into the lens and spoke with a sincerity that was impossible to fake. "Coach Frank, if you're watching this, I need you to listen to me. My name is Travis Kelce, and I was one of your players from 1999 to 2004. You probably don't remember me specifically. You coached hundreds of kids over the years, but I remember you. You taught me that being a champion wasn't about winning games, making money, or getting famous. You taught me that being a champion was about how you treated other people, especially people who couldn't help you in return. You taught me that real strength came from helping others find their own strength. Travis paused, gathering his thoughts before continuing with even greater intensity. But here's what I need you to know, Coach Frank. I'm struggling. I've got money and fame and all the things people think should make you happy, but I'm lost. I'm making decisions in my personal life that I know aren't right. I'm sometimes treating people in ways that would disappoint the man who taught me better. I need my coach back, Travis continued, his voice growing stronger. I need the man who could see through all the noise and help a confused kid figure out who he really wanted to be. I need someone to remind me of the lessons you taught me, because somewhere along the way, I've forgotten some of them. The studio was completely silent as Travis delivered what amounted to a public plea for mentorship. Coach Frank, I know you're going through a hard time right now. I know you're dealing with challenges that would break most people. But the thing is, you're not most people. You're Coach Frank, and even in your lowest moment, you have more wisdom and character than most people have at their best. I'm going to be at the community center where you used to run your program every day at 3 o'clock for the next week, Travis said, providing specific, actionable information. I'm not coming there to rescue you or to give you charity. I'm coming there because I need your help. I need you to coach me through some things I can't figure out on my own. Travis leaned closer to the camera, his final words carrying the weight of absolute sincerity. You once told me that a coach's job never ends, that we carry our players with us wherever we go. Well, Coach, your player is asking for help. Not financial help, not publicity help, but the kind of help that only Coach Frank Whitmore can provide. I hope you'll meet with me. When the interview ended, Travis felt both exhausted and energized. He had put himself in a vulnerable position on national television, admitting to personal struggles he had never discussed publicly. But more importantly, he had found a way to approach Coach Frank that preserved the man's dignity while offering a path toward reconnection. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, Travis's phone was flooded with calls from former players of Coach Frank's who had seen the broadcast. Men now in their 20s and 30s, scattered across the country, all sharing stories of how Coach Frank had impacted their lives and expressing their desire to help in any way possible. But the call that mattered most came that evening. It was Tommy Rodriguez calling from his cell phone in an obvious state of excitement. Travis, I don't know what you said in that interview, but Frank saw it. He found a way to watch it at the library downtown. And afterwards he asked me to drive him to the community center to look around. Did he say anything about meeting with me? Travis asked, hardly daring to hope. He didn't commit to anything, Tommy replied honestly, but for the first time in months, I saw something in his eyes that looked like the old Frank. He asked me if I thought you were serious about needing his help, or if this was just some kind of publicity stunt. What did you tell him? I told him that anybody who would put themselves out there like that on national television, admitting their own struggles and asking for help, probably wasn't doing it for publicity. I told him it looked like genuine respect to me. The community center where Coach Frank had run his youth football program looked smaller than Travis remembered. But then again, everything seemed smaller and viewed through adult eyes. The building showed its age, peeling paint on the exterior walls, cracked concrete steps leading to the main entrance, windows that hadn't been properly cleaned in months. But walking through those familiar doors brought back a flood of memory that hit Travis with unexpected emotional force. He had arrived 30 minutes early for his first scheduled meeting, unsure whether Coach Frank would actually show up, but determined to be there regardless. The main gymnasium still smelled like old rubber mat and teenage sweat, a combination that immediately transported him back to afternoons spent running drill and learning life lessons disguised as football fundamentals. Mrs. Rodriguez, the center's longtime director, greeted Travis with a mixture of surprise and genuine warmth. "Travis Kelce, as I live and breathe," she said, embracing him with the familiarity of someone who had watched him grow up. "I saw you on television talking about Coach Frank. That was beautiful, son. Frank was like family to all of us here." "Is he still family to you?" Travis asked, the question carrying more weight than casual conversation. Mrs. Rodriguez's expression grew sad. We tried to help him when everything started falling apart, but Frank's pride wouldn't let him accept anything from us. He said he couldn't face the kids and families he had worked with over the years, not in his condition. It broke our hearts, watching him isolate himself like that. Travis walked through the empty gymnasium, his footsteps echoing off the walls, as he remembered countless afternoons spent in this exact space. He could almost hear Coach Frank's voice calling out instructions, see the ghost images of himself and his teammates running through drills, learning not just how to play football, but how to be accountable to something larger than themselves. He used to say that this gym was sacred ground, Travis said aloud, as much to himself as to Mrs. Rodriguez. He said that every drop of sweat, every lesson learned, every moment of growth that happened here made it holy. He treated coaching like it was a calling, not just a job. At exactly 3 o'clock, Travis heard the main door open and close. He turned toward the entrance, his heart rate immediately accelerating as he saw a familiar silhouette moving slowly through the hallway. Coach Frank appeared in the gymnasium doorway, and Travis was struck again by how much the man had changed, but also by how much he remained recognizably the same person who had shaped his childhood. Coach Frank was clean. Someone had clearly helped him shower and find fresh clothes. His hair and beard were trimmed, and he wore a simple button-down shirt and clean jeans that, while obviously donated, fit reasonably well. But it was his posture that told the real story. Where the Coach Frank of Travis's memory had stood tall and confident, this version moved carefully, as if unsure of his welcome in a space where he had once been the undisputed authority. "Hello, Travis," Coach Frank said quietly, his voice carrying the same warm tone Travis remembered, but tempered with uncertainty. "I wasn't sure if you really meant what you said on television, or if I should actually come here." "I meant every word of it, Coach," Travis replied, fighting the urge to rush forward and embrace the man who had been such a pivotal figure in his development. "Thank you for coming. I know this isn't easy for you." They stood looking at each other across the gymnasium for a long moment, both men clearly emotional but unsure how to bridge the gap between past and present. Finally, Coach Frank took a few steps into the room, his eyes scanning the familiar space with obvious nostalgia. "This place looks exactly the same," Coach Frank observed, a small smile crossing his face for the first time. Same scuffed floors, same faded paint on the walls, same smell of old equipment and young dreams. "I spent so many hours in this room, I sometimes felt like I lived here more than I lived at home." "You practically did live here," Travis said with a laugh. "I remember you being here when we arrived for practice, and still being here when we left. My mom used to joke that you must have had a cot hidden somewhere in the equipment room." The mention of Travis's mother seemed to spark something in Coach Frank's memory. "Your mother, yes. Single mom, working multiple jobs, worried sick about keeping you out of trouble. She used to thank me for keeping you busy after school. But the truth was, you boys kept me grounded. Coaching you kids gave my life purpose and meaning in ways I don't think I fully appreciated at the time." Travis saw an opening in the conversation and decided to pursue the approach Dr. Hayes had suggested. "Coach Frank, I need to be honest with you about why I asked you to meet me here. Yes, I wanted to reconnect with you and make sure you were okay, but I also genuinely need your help with some things I'm struggling with." Coach Frank raised an eyebrow, skepticism evident in his expression. "Travis, you're a successful professional athlete with more money and opportunities than most people could dream of. What could an old failure like me possibly help you?" "You're not a failure," Travis said firmly. "And the fact that you think you are is exactly why I need your perspective. See, that's one of my problems. I've gotten so caught up in external measures of success that I've lost touch with the internal measures you taught me were more important." Travis began pacing slightly as he gathered his thought, a habit Coach Frank immediately recognized from their old training session. "I make decisions based on what will advance my career or increase my income, instead of asking myself, what would make me proud of who I am as a person? I've got all this platform and influence, but I'm not sure I'm using it the way you taught me I should." "Ooh, what do you mean, specifically?" Coach Frank asked, his natural coaching instincts beginning to override his self-doubt. "I mean, I've become selfish," Travis admitted. "I know you taught me that real strength comes from lifting other people up, but I spend most of my energy lifting myself up. I know you taught me that character is what you do when no one is watching, but I'm always conscious of who's watching and how my actions will be perceived publicly." Coach Frank moved closer, his body language shifting subtly as he fell back into the familiar role of mentor. "Give me an example of a specific situation where you felt like you made the wrong choice." Travis thought for a moment before responding. "Last month, I had the opportunity to spend a weekend visiting kids in the hospital, but I chose to go to a celebrity golf tournament instead because it would be better for my brand and my networking. The hospital visit wouldn't have generated any publicity, so I convinced myself it wasn't worth my time." "And how did that decision make you feel?" Coach Frank asked, slipping seamlessly back into the questioning technique he had used to help young players work through their problem. "Hollow," Travis answered immediately. "It made me feel hollow and fake, like I was betraying everything you taught me about using whatever gifts I have to serve something bigger than myself." Coach Frank nodded slowly, and for the first time since entering the gymnasium, he looked like the confident mentor Travis remembered. "Travis, success without purpose is just elaborate emptiness. You can accumulate all the achievements and accolades in the world, but if you're not using your platform to make other people's lives better, you'll always feel that hollowness." The conversation continued for nearly 2 hours, with Coach Frank gradually returning to his natural role as teacher, and Travis rediscovering the simple power of having someone challenge him to think beyond his own immediate interests. When their meeting concluded, something fundamental had shifted in both men. Dr. Hayes had been right about the power of restoring purpose. Over the following weeks, Travis arranged for Coach Frank to receive proper medical care and mental health support, but more importantly, he helped him reconnect with his identity as a mentor and guide. Tommy Rodriguez facilitated introductions to other homeless veterans who could benefit from Coach Frank's unique combination of life experience and natural teaching ability. Within 3 months, Coach Frank was leading a peer counseling program for veterans transitioning out of homelessness. The community center provided space for the program, and Dr. Hayes offered professional supervision and training. Coach Frank found himself once again in his element, helping men and women who were struggling with many of the same demons he had faced. The program wasn't easy for anyone involved, including Coach Frank, who experienced setbacks and difficult days throughout his own recovery process. But Dr. Hayes had been right about the power of peer support. Helping others navigate their struggle had given Coach Frank a reason to continue navigating his own. He discovered that his personal experience with loss, depression, and homelessness didn't disqualify him from helping others. It made him uniquely qualified to understand their pain and guide them toward hope. Travis visited regularly, not as a celebrity making charity appearances, but as a former player continuing to learn from his coach. Their relationship had evolved into something deeper than their original mentor-student dynamic. They had become two men who understood that growth and healing were lifelong processes that required ongoing support and accountability. Marcus Holbrook and several other former players also became involved, creating a network of support that extended far beyond what any single person could have provided. They established a fund to support the program, but more importantly, they created a community who understood the value of giving back to the man who had given so much to them. One evening, as Travis was leaving the community center after observing one of Coach Frank's group sessions, his former mentor walked him to the parking lot. Coach Frank looked healthier and more confident than he had in years, but carried himself with a humility that spoke to everything he had been through. "Travis," Coach Frank said, "I need to thank you for something that goes beyond all the practical help you provided. You reminded me that my value as a person isn't determined by my circumstances, but by what I choose to do with whatever circumstances I find myself in." "You taught me that lesson when I was 8 years old," Travis replied. "I just had to return the favor." Coach Frank smiled with the same warmth and confidence Travis remembered from his childhood. "You know what I've learned through all of this? Sometimes the coach needs coaching, and sometimes the student becomes the teacher. But the most important thing is that nobody gives up on anybody, no matter how lost they seem. A coach's job never ends," Travis said, repeating one of Coach Frank's favorite sayings. "No," Coach Frank agreed, looking back at the community center where lights were still on in the gymnasium. "It never does, because the lessons we teach become part of who our players are forever, and the lessons our players teach us become part of who we are forever too. That's the real victory, when everyone keeps growing, keeps learning, keeps lifting each other up, As Travis drove home that night, he reflected on how the crisis that had begun with a shocking moment on live television had evolved into something far more meaningful than a simple rescue mission. Coach Frank hadn't just been saved from homelessness. He had rediscovered his purpose and reclaimed his identity as someone who helps others find their strength. The program Coach Frank now led had helped dozens of veterans transition out of homelessness, and its success had attracted attention from social service organizations across the country. But perhaps more importantly, it had restored Coach Frank's understanding of his own value and given him a reason to continue growing and healing. 6 months after that first devastating encounter under the overpass, Travis received a call from Tommy Rodriguez with news that brought tears to his eyes. Coach Frank had been asked to speak at a national conference on veteran homelessness, sharing his story and the innovative peer counseling model they had developed together. "He's nervous about it," Tommy reported, "but he's excited too. He keeps saying he wants other cities to know that there's hope, that people can come back from the darkest places if someone believes in them and gives them a purpose." Travis smiled, knowing that Coach Frank was about to touch hundreds of lives in the same way he had touched Travis's life all those years ago. The man who had once felt like a failure was now being recognized as a pioneer in helping others overcome their darkest moments. The story that had begun with shock and recognition on live television had become something much more powerful, a testament to the enduring bond between teachers and students, and proof that sometimes the greatest victories come not from individual success, but from lifting each other up when the weight of the world becomes too much to bear alone.